Enough is enough. I don't care if your game is in early access, closed beta, open beta, a demo, 1.0, 3.0, 5.0. You add a tutorial to your game right now. Video game developers are getting worse and worse and worse, and they're using every single excuse they can think of for why they don't have a basic tutorial in their game. This doesn't have anything to do with difficulty. This doesn't have anything to do with hand-holding. This is about priority, and this is about expectations. If you're a game and you've got all of this extra fancy bullshit that doesn't matter, but you didn't take time to make a basic tutorial, that shows me that you don't give a shit about your players' first impressions. Priorities. That's one of the things I mentioned. I said priorities and I said expectations. Why is a tutorial so important? A tutorial is important because it sets the expectations for both the player and towards the developer. A player knows that they're expected to press this button to get this sort of response from the game. It's basic. It's standard. Do it. A player knows that if they're expected to press this button to get this reaction from the game, then it's their fault if something doesn't happen because they pressed it with bad timing or didn't press it at all. The developer has an expectation for the player has an expectation for the developer. The game makes more sense if you have a tutorial and set the expectations. More and more frequently, I'm having to talk about games that don't do this. A lot of people seem to think that having a tutorial means that your starting area or your starting section of the game is a boring slog, or that a tutorial needs to be some sort of long, never-ending thing that explains to you every function of every button and everything. It doesn't have to be like that, okay? There are games like, for example, Hollow Knight. All they have to do is tell you, this is jump, this is attack. And then from there, you're off on your way. It's quite simple. It doesn't have to be this complicated thing. But it stays a complicated point of contention for many video games, and I don't understand it. And I especially don't understand why all of the most complicated games with the most controls, functions, and features, with the ability to do all of this extra stuff that most people won't even bother interacting with, refuse to tell you how you're supposed to interact with it. You open up the options menu and there are controls that you have to scroll for like a solid minute to get to the bottom of, but the game has no damn tutorial. There's also this argument that old games don't have tutorials, so that tutorials are a new invention made to pander to people who are slower or less perceptive to video game language. That's also a load of horse crap. Because you want to know what old video games come with? Instruction manuals. And what does the instruction manual have inside of it? A list of the controls, the buttons, what they do, how you're supposed to use them. It's a tutorial on paper. You're literally not going to get around me with this argument. Video games are supposed to have tutorials, and your game, your favorite game, the game you play, the game you're making, not having a tutorial is a worse experience for not having a tutorial. Having a little bit of instructions isn't going to kill anyone. Now, you can make it hurt the sales of your games by making it obnoxious and intrusive to the gameplay. But again, do it right, be a good developer, and develop your game properly. You'll have a tutorial in it that does what it's supposed to do, and your game will be better for it. It's not asking for much. I'm not saying that you have to have a cinematic thing. I'm not saying that you have to have voice acting for every single thing. Games have figured this out for years. Years. Add a tutorial. Do it first before you add in all of your extra frills and your fancy garnishes to your game. I don't care that you have a fancy ship. I don't care how realistic your lighting is if you don't have a tutorial. Enough is enough.